Space Jam might have been my very first guilty pleasure cartoon. Even when I first saw it, I could recognize on some level how threadbare and random the writing often was, and how professional athlete Michael Jordan's performance was. At 4, I'd already seen many better films and even better Looney Tunes things, but still, something kept me coming back to this one, wearing that VHS even thinner than a Goofy movie. Maybe it was just the high-energy editing exciting my young mind. Maybe it was the pronounced stylistic differences in how Lola Bunny was drawn compared to the other Looney Tunes, which I found to be oddly interesting for a reason that it would take me several more years to finally put my fingers on. I think the most likely answer, though, is the same one that explains all of my guilty pleasures that aren't related to that other reason. I'm a natural-born grassophobic anime weirdo, and Space Jam is an isekai. It might have been my first isekai, actually. It definitely beat Digimon to the punch, and I don't remember when I got into Narnia, Oz, or Alice in Wonderland. Wait, does Fraggle Rock count? Anyway, while it's obviously indisputable that this film is an isekai, I have started to wonder, how good of an isekai is it, really, when held to the standards set by modern anime classics? How does In Another Space with My Jam compare to the likes of Yashahime, That Time I Got Reincarnated as Yamcha, and Sword Art Online? Should it be considered essential viewing for isekai completionists? Today, we're gonna find out with objective scientific certainty by rating the film on a 10-point scale in 10 categories that I have determined with my expert credentials to be the most essential to the overall isekai experience, which will give us a final percentage score measuring the precise isekosity of Michael Jordan's magnum opus. Those categories are, in rough order of importance: 1. OP and ED quality. The first thing we look at when judging any anime is its opening credits sequence. Obviously, because that's the first thing you see of any anime, unless you're a filthy OP skipper, in which case, Human Teeth Sonic will crawl out from under your bed at night and hot glue all your figurines. The banger intro, or at least an attempt at one, is an essential part of what separates proper anime, like Metal Gear Solid 2 and Cory in the House, from plain old cartoons. Thus, by tossing a bunch of random Michael Jordan highlights in an After Effects blender and calling it a day, Our Last Jam, or The Rise of a New Space, has definitively disqualified itself from ever being called anime. It's not all bad. The song backing these credits is a jam that absolutely slams, and there is an attempt made to chart Michael Jordan's career trajectory in between all the gratuitous digital filter vomit, as was the style at the time. It's just barely passable for a 90s feature film, and that is not a high bar to clear, so I give it 2 out of a possible 7 points. The other 3 will, of course, come from the ending credits, or they would if its ending credits were worth even 1. Sadly, they're literally just default font text over random screenshots from the movie, and not even good screenshots. Like, why, out of all the frames of the two leads together that you possibly could have used, would you pick the one where Mike is staring directly into the camera and not reacting to bugs on his lap at all? 2 out of 10. 2. Fan service level. No Space, No Jam picks up some much-needed points in this second most important category for what I believe are obvious reasons. But fan service isn't just Sakuga-up sexy stuff, it's also nods and references to important and obscure franchise lore upon which only the truly hardcore will pick up, as well as broader nods to adjacent pop culture that make all viewers feel urbane and well-read for having understood that reference. The film covers that latter category quite effectively when Bill Murray shows up and says, "Hey, I'm Bill Murray. I want to do a pro basketball as my career now because I'm just that zany." And then perfects it when Danny DeVito, whose voice was just made for cartoons, says,
"I didn't know Dan Aykroyd was in this picture."
As for the former, I mean, just about every single character ever animated by the Warner Brothers classic animation team gets at least a background cameo here, if not a speaking one. It's a shame that none of the then newly iconic Animaniacs or Tiny Toons were given such a tribute, but still, it's hard to be disappointed with all these legacy deep cuts. Also, sorry, there's no getting around this. Putting jokes about that other kind of fan service aside, while Lola might not be quite as over-the-top as the internet remembers, there's no denying that she was brought to life with some very anime, these artists haven't seen another human being in 6 months of crunch kind of energy, and while we could ask a lot of very valid questions about whether that's appropriate for a children's movie, or might have had some long-term repercussions on the kids who grew up with it, what's done is done, and I want to wrap this video so I can go watch the new season of Beastars, so let's not and say we did. 8 out of 10. 3. Escapist appeal. While they're not exactly relatable, the problems our hero wants to escape from in Spacerus Jammer Jordan are actually pretty interesting. A nice change of pace from the genre's default of lonely gamer boys. After losing his father, in the worst way possible IRL, though the film doesn't really touch on that, Mike feels lost and seeks to find himself and a connection to his dad through the sport they both loved, baseball. But it's just not his game, and the simpering yes-men who surround him are only making that harder for him to see. When Bugs yanks him down the rabbit hole into the other world, he's given a chance to get away from those concerns, worry about something bigger than himself, and rediscover the natural-born godly talent that made him an unrivaled superstar. Again, not a relatable basis for a hero, but certainly a fun one. For the average 90s moviegoer, Jordan's celebrity lifestyle and the luxuriant locations to which it often takes him provide as much of a pleasant break from reality as the wacky world down below. The only time we really spend in everyday reality happens before the credits, and in not Nedry's car, I guess. As for the film's deeper fantasy elements, while there is a lot of potential horror in meeting your favorite cartoons on their turf, allowing Looney Tunes logic to apply to the human body defangs a lot of that, leaving a fun and pleasant playground of zany possibilities for Michael to explore. Unfortunately, the film makes it pretty clear that for anyone who's not a human Adonis, that potential mostly manifests as being able to survive excruciating physical trauma, so I don't know if this is really providing any sort of wish fulfillment to anyone who's not his airness. All in all, 6 out of 10. 4. Isekai town utilization. The fourth most important thing that every good isekai needs to have is this town. Chivalry of a Jammed Space does not contain this town or anything remotely resembling this town. 0 out of 10. It's a shame, really, that the jamming of the space hero was made back in the Dark Ages before the internet, because in modern times, the Looney Tunes could have stolen at least one easy point here simply by setting their location to Isekaiville with today's sponsor, ExpressVPN, who, by rerouting your web traffic through one of their high-speed servers in 94 different countries, will both protect your data from digital looky-loos and allow you to browse any site on the web as if you live where it's hosted, circumventing pesky region locks and any local network restrictions in the process. Thanks to ExpressVPN, Canadians like me don't need to brave the potential pandemic petri dish of our local theaters to be disappointed by Space Jam 2. We can just change our location to the US with the tap of an app, sign up for HBO Max, and enjoy it, or watch it at least, in the comfort of our own homes. And Americans can likewise take advantage of their powerful service to watch The Lord of the Rings or Naruto Shippuden on Canadian Netflix. Without a VPN, the internet is like an impossibly deep stack of signs nailed to a tree that all say Wabbit season. To see for yourself how much bigger the internet can get and find out how to get 3 months of ExpressVPN free, head to expressvpn.com/basement or click the link in the doobly-doo today. 5. Worldbuilding Integrity. The land of the Looney Tunes is a truly fascinating setting on a conceptual level, made all the more so by the unique Isekai cosmology this film adds to the mix. Much like Vision of Escaflowne, instead of the usual parallel reality shtick, My Space Can't Possibly Be This Jammed metaphysically connects its real and fantasy worlds with both Toon outer space and a Toon underworld existing above and below respectively, an earthbound sliver of meat space in which presumably all of Warner Brothers' live-action movies take place. The precise nature of how these adjacent realities coexist is never fully explained, but that show-don't-tell approach to exposition only increases the film's potential for isekai immersion. On that note, though, as our hero is getting isekai'd into an established setting, it's also important to consider how faithful a certain jammed space is to the Looney Tunes' overall brand identity. But as far as making me feel like I've stepped into the classic cartoons goes, it leaves a little bit to be desired. 6 out of 10. 6. Power System Engineering. Of course, power and magic systems go part and parcel with world building in Isekai, and on those grounds, Space Jam and Other Jam, the Los Angeles Bugs Bunny murder cases, stands a little bit stronger. Looney Tunes logic, which allows perception to alter reality as characters both take and dish out insanely lethal hits with amusing regularity, has a lot of potential as a basis for animated action, as anyone who's read One Piece can tell you. It's designed to be instantaneously understandable without any exposition, with hard and fast, self-evident rules that can be exploited in very creative fashion. Unfortunately, the supplementary nerd luck power system that was invented for this film isn't nearly as well thought out and demands far more explanation than it's given. How exactly are these fugly little sneaker slugs able to turn into ghost goo and suck the talent out of human brains? Why is that talent stored as glowing energy in a basketball? It's all quite confusing and muddles what's otherwise a very elegant system. Worse still, while the Looney Tunes logic system does have a lot of potential, the film doesn't really take full advantage of it or let its isekai hero play around with it until the dramatic down-to-the-wire climax. And while limiting your hero's access to magic is a creative decision that I respected in ReZero and can certainly respect here, it still feels like some potential fun was left on the table. 7 out of 10. 7. Fight hype. Alongside a good power system, a good isekai's gotta have good fights, or at least a good substitute for good fights. I'll take lavishly animated food if you're offering. In terms of animation, for both physical and beam attacks, Slam Jam Monogatari definitely has the stuff. However, there's not a lot of strategy in either the basketball or combat aspects of the film. All that beautifully rendered cartoon violence is mainly used in service of gag comedy, which is fine, it's what I come to Looney Tunes for, but it's not what I come to superpowered isekai for, and this category's requirements are pretty specific, unless you bribe me with anime food. So, even accounting for that one genuinely hype moment where Mike takes the magic system into account and goes all body horror on us to save the day at the last second, the best I can give this film for how its fights excite is a 4 out of 10. 8. Can he beat Goku Tho? On a related note, what's even the point of making an escapist portal fantasy these days if you can't mathematically quantify how close the protagonists are to beating up Goku? In grand internet death battle tradition, the way we measure this is by looking at the most impressive feat or flex performed by a character within the film or show and weighing it against Goku's known strengths and weaknesses. In Grimgar of Space and Jam's case, that would be the moment when, through a brilliant exploitation of fair use exemptions for parody and colloquialisms, Bugs Bunny is able to sneak this line,
"What kind of Mickey Mouse organization would name their team the Ducks?"
past both Warner Brothers and Disney's lawyers. Bugs completely owned Mickey there, and as the film rights to Dragon Ball are currently owned by Disney after the Fox merger, by the transitive property ipso facto QED, Bugs Bunny could totally own Goku, and since Mike is canonically stronger than Bugs, so could he. 10 out of 10. 9. Sakuga Craftsmanship. On the subject of flexing, while many successful ones more or less go without it, it never hurts an isekai to let its animators flex their skills a bit over the course of production with the kind of high-quality animation that we anime scholars call Sakuga. Which, and I mean this with zero irony, is an aspect of Is It Wrong to Try to Jam in Space that more people need to appreciate. I've seen this movie catch some flack for its visuals, and a lot of the gripes are valid. It overuses close-ups to an uncomfortable degree, the CGI is very Dreamcast, and the digital pillow shading effect that gives the toons their depth looks a little crappy. It does work in the composite to make them look like they're sharing space with the physical actors, though, and the line art underneath that wonky shader is something to see, especially in motion. While the dialogue in Space and Jam is inconsistent at best, the Looney Tunes animation is at the most fluid and expressive it's ever been in 2D. From subtle things like Bugs and Lola exchanging furtive glances across the final huddle in the last seconds of the game, to much more obvious visual gags like the Nerdlux literally licking Swackhammer's boots and everything Taz does, every motion these toons make is in character and full of character. And they make a lot of motions in not a lot of runtime, as their simple designs allow for every body in a crowd shot to be animated independently without it being too taxing on the animators. There is so much top-tier cartoon slapstick in the backgrounds of this movie alone. The crowds do get simpler and stiffer in the big showdown with the Monstars, as all those characters have got to be composited into the 3D stadium like roadside characters and trees in Initial D, but to make up for that, the hand-animated action in the foreground gets even more dynamic, with 3D camera movement wildly ambitious enough to make you photable blink, 2D to 3D compositing better than most modern anime. Just look at the reflections in those floorboards, and a live-action human character in the mix on top of all that. On that note, let's not forget about the smooth, single-shot transition from live-action cityscape to CGI cartoon space to the traditionally animated theme park interior of Moron Mountain. That was a hell of a special effects flex. It may not be Roger Rabbit. It may have paved the way for the plague of Smurfs and Chipmunks and Toms and Jerrys that are perpetually taking Manhattan these days, but this film contains many impressive feats of animation and technical innovation, especially for 1996, and it deserves some damn respect for them, even if some of the CGI is straight nightmare fuel. 9 out of 10. 10. Hero progression. It's also important for an isekai to consider the effect that its magical journey will have on its protagonist in the long term, the lessons they'll learn and the growth they'll undergo as a result of their struggles and victories. Now, Michael Jordan doesn't really struggle much at all in Konospeja, God's jamming on this wonderful space, and he doesn't grow much either, except physically right at the end there. He's a monster on the court from minute one, and all the tension in the big game really comes from wondering if his teammates will get their butts in gear and pick up the slack. I'd go so far as to say that he struggles more before getting isekai'd, with the growing doubt that he made the wrong call moving into pro baseball. And ultimately, the events of the film only really help him make up his mind about a thing he was already seriously considering. Charles Barkley arguably has more of an arcly in that one scene where he's wistfully watching kids play basketball than Mike does in this entire movie. So, of course, it goes without saying that when judged by the standards of character development set by all the other great isekai heroes, Space Jam gets a solid 7 out of 10. Good work, Mike. You're exactly as interesting as Kirito. Which brings the film's final total on the isekai scale to a respectable, if unimpressive, 59%. Better than I expected, honestly, given Space Jam's unconventional subject matter, lack of gamer cred, and the fact that it came out long before any of these standards were set. At any rate, it is over the halfway mark, meaning that his airness does not dream of Bugs Bunny Girl Senpai is required viewing for anyone who wants to say that they've seen every isekai in existence. I don't know why anyone would want to do that, but if you do, there you go. I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.